What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the channel. My name's John. I go by Geo the Genius. That's my producer name. And this is the first video of many to come. And today we are going to talk about mix setup and gain staging. So we're going to get right into it. Basically, before you start mixing, you want to make sure that you have the proper setup to your mix, whether that's color coding, bussing, and gain staging. Those are my three main steps in that order that I go through to set up my mix. So let me show you how that looks and how we do that. So I'm in my DAW. I use Studio One. Really doesn't matter what DAW you use. There are ways to do this in every DAW. I don't know how to do it in every DAW because this is the DAW I use. So first, when you look at the screen, this is the view of my mixer. All right. So the first thing you're going to notice is everything is color coded. Now, you color code things whatever you want. The way I do it is I do my drums in purple, I do my bass in yellow, then I have my instruments. They're green. There's a lot of instruments. I usually split them up between green and blue. And then I have my my effects, my vocal chops, my other stuff. In this song, they're vocal chops. I do them pink. So also they're in a specific order. I always do my drums first, then I do my bass, then I do my instruments, then I do my my vocal chops and my effects. Why do I do this? One, if everything's in the same order all the time, I know where everything is. Makes it much easier to mix. If I need to adjust something, I know where it is. I don't have to start scrolling through the mixer looking for what channel is what. Also, that's why the color coding helps. I know my drums are purple. I have to adjust something in the drums. They're right there for me. It's very easy to see. It's very easy to work through. Everything that I'm telling you today, one of the main reasons why we do it is to speed up your workflow. The faster you get at mixing, not that you're rushing, but the faster you get at mixing, the more you can concentrate on the creative elements of mixing and not, focusing on where things are or backtracking and, things of that nature. So you want to get efficient at mixing. You will become better as you become more efficient. So that's how I color code and order my tracks. Then I like to bus everything. So each group of colors go to their respective bus. Now what a bus channel is, all those, we'll use the drums for example, all these drum tracks go to this central channel, which is a bus. Think of a bus as transportation. These are all the people. They get on the bus takes these people to the next stop. All right? So we have our drums, they go to the drum bus. We have our 808s, they go to the bass bus. We have our instruments, they go to the instrument bus. We have our vocal chops, they go to the Vox bus. Now, everybody's on their own buses. Where do the buses go? The buses go, in this case, to another bus. They go to a 2 bus. All the buses then go to the 2 bus. After the 2 bus then goes out to the master fader. Why do I use a 2 bus? I don't like to put any effects on my master fader, except like the final limiter, before I'm getting ready to, export an MP3 for streaming, or finish a beat or a song for upload to Spotify, or the streaming version of a beat for BeatStars. That's where the final limiter goes. That goes on the master fader. Everything else goes on the 2 bus. I also put my metering plugin. I use Insights. That goes on the master fader. But other than that, I don't put effects on the master fader. Also, it allows me to adjust the volume of the whole mix and leave the master fader at 0. So if I need to bring the whole mix down, or I want to bring the whole mix up, I can do that right here on the 2 bus, and the master fader stays at 0. Okay, so now we have all our tracks color coded. We have them all bussed. Everything's organized. What's the next step? We want to gain stage. What's gain staging? You hear a lot of people talk about gain staging, proper gain structure. Basically, easiest way to explain it is all your faders are at 0, and you have a very rough mix where your levels are at a place where no tracks are distorting and your master fader is not distorting. And by distorting, I mean clipping. In the digital realm, anything above 0 dB is going to be clipping. It's not like analog where you can push past that a little bit and sometimes it sounds good. You want that sound. You do not want that in digital. Again, there's really no rules to mixing, but that's a pretty, you really don't want to go above 0 dB, especially on your master fader. If you clip, it's going to sound like shit. So, how do we do that? Again, every DAW is different. In Studio One, I have these things called input knobs. They're up at the top of my track. Other DAWs have things called gain knobs, and you can get gain plugins. And what they do is they adjust the input level of each individual track, each individual instrument, each individual sound. So with this knob, you adjust the level of the signal on its way into the channel before you move the fader. So what that's going to allow you to do is get a good level going, a good rough mix going with all your faders at 0 dB, unity gain. Why do we want to stay at unity gain? Because on a mixer, each fader has something called resolution. Resolution is basically depending on how much you move the fader, how much the volume is going to change. Towards unity gain, which is 0 dB, you have much finer resolution on the fader. So if you look at this drum bus, we're up around 0 dB. So if I move the fader a little bit, right, I'm going plus or minus 2 dB, right, with all this movement. Plus or minus 2 dB. And you see how much I'm moving. As we go further down, that same movement, now we're like, plus or minus, almost 10 dB for the same movement. You go down further, same movement, you're plus or minus 15, 20. Towards the bottom, 113, you're 70, 80, dB for the same movement. So when you're mixing, you want to be able to really fine tune your mix and get, good adjustments and really get your levels where you want them to be. So if you stay around 0 dB, you're going to have much more control over the level of your individual sounds. So that's why we gain stage. So I'm not going to go through every track and do it. I have this mix already gain staged, but first I want you to hear what it sounds like when it's not gain staged. Everything is at 0 dB. It's going to distort. Okay, so you really don't have to see any more than that. You can see the bass was up in the red. That's clipping and distorting. The 2 bus was distorting, and the main fader was topped out. And it sounded like shit. It was distorting. We don't want that. So, what do? We gain stage. So now if you see, all these input faders, these input knobs, are all adjusted. Not on the bus. You don't have to adjust it on the bus. I rarely touch this on the bus. But on the individual channels, I adjusted all these levels. And when I adjust them, I like to stay somewhere between negative 24 and negative 12 dB. That gives me plenty of headroom on each individual track, and then it gives me plenty of headroom on the master fader. Why do we want to have this headroom before we actually start mixing? Moving faders, adding EQs, adding saturation, adding compression, filters, clippers, limiters, whatever, however you mix, whatever you add. We want to have this room because as you're adding those things, you're naturally going to increase the level of the track. So, if we're not properly gain staged and we just move the faders around, when we start adding these plugins and effects, what tends to happen is the master fader creeps up, and then you start to clip. And then when you start to clip, you have to bring everything back down. So when you're trying to be in a creative mixing workflow, you don't want to have to go backwards. So what you don't want to do is add a compressor, add some saturation, and then realize, oh shit, I'm distorting. And you got to go back. And then you got to start lowering faders. But then you're changing levels. So now you have to start lowering other faders. So you're constantly going backwards, trying to readjust your mix. You can never just always be moving forward. You know, when you're mixing, you always want to be moving forward. You don't want to keep going back to change things that you already set. You already set the level of your kick. You already set the level of your snare and your hi-hat and your 808. You don't want to add things around the mix and then realize, oh shit, I got to go back and change everything. It takes too long. You can't get into a creative workflow, and the end product will suffer for it. Can you do it? Yes. Is it efficient? No. I used to work like that until I learned how to do this, and it totally changed the way I mix. So now this track is properly gain staged, and I'm going to play it, and you're going to hear the difference. Yes, it's lower, but that's okay. You know, if you see the levels, none of the levels on the individual tracks are really above negative 12 dB. You know, they're all sitting somewhere between negative 12 and negative 24, roughly. And the mix sounds okay. It doesn't sound great. It's not done, but you have a good rough level. You know, you can hear everything. The kick and the 808 and the snare and everything is sitting roughly where it should be sitting. You know, the rough levels are at a good place, and that's what you want. And also, if you noticed, if we look at the master fader, you know, we're peaking. The highest we get is negative 7.5 dB. So we have plenty of headroom. We have headroom on the channels. We have headroom on the master fader. Now we can mix and do what we have to do, and not worry, you know, about clipping and distortion, and we can be creative and we can do what we want to do to the song. We can get the sound we want to get. Now, a couple of things I want to mention real quick. It's lower. Yes. You want it louder? Turn up your speakers. Turn up your headphones. Doesn't have to be loud on the computer or in the DAW. You can always make it louder of how you're monitoring. You can make that as loud as you want. I don't recommend listening super loud. I check loud, but I like to mix at relatively low volumes. So yeah, if you want it louder, turn it up, not inside the DAW. The other thing is these levels that I'm saying, negative 24, negative 12, that's what I do. You know, it doesn't, those numbers are not set in stone. That just works for me. That's what I found works in my workflow. You know, you might be negative 12 to negative 6, you know, depending on how loud the samplers you're using are. You know, if you have your virtual instruments, your VSTs, how loud you have those. There's a lot of places you can adjust this gain. But the point is, you want to have a good, rough mix before you actually start mixing. So you have room, you can do what you want to do, and you can be creative with your mix and not have to constantly backtrack. So that's the idea, guys. I hope I helped some you out. If you like the content, please like, subscribe in the comments. I'd love it if you let me know what other kind of videos you'd like to see from me. You know, I want to thank you for joining me tonight. This is my first video. So again, I hope you liked it. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back with some more videos like this. All right? Have a great night, guys. Take care.
Only way to the light, I know. Are you friend or foe? Please just let me know. Only way to the light, I know. I can't even feel myself no more. Did I really feel myself before? Been holding on when I need to let go. Kingdom come and take me home. Are you friend or foe?